Welcome to the Mile High Hoops podcast right here on Denver Sports. I am Jake Shapiro, our Nuggets person, leading all of our hoops coverage here in the Mile High City. And we've got some red flags popping up in Denver. I'll talk about that in just a second. We'll talk about Paul Millsap, one of the most influential Nuggets of the last several years, finally calling his career a quits. So we'll talk about that, and we'll get into some other stuff too, as the Nuggets have two big games coming up this week, including tonight. And in tonight's game against the Golden State Warriors, we're talking to you on Tuesday, we might see the red flag that keeps popping up in Denver, which is that the Nuggets, post-Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, are very much struggling to guard smaller guards out on the perimeter. This is an issue that we saw pop up big time against the Los Angeles Clippers on Sunday. It's actually happened in both Clippers matchups this year. James Harden goes off for 39 points in the 4-point win for LA. Norm Powell, Stormin' Norman, cooked the Nuggets in their game against the Nuggets back in Denver to start the season. So both of the Clippers guards, smaller guards, have had a lot of success against the Nuggets defense. And we've also seen this with some other teams as well, with their smaller perimeter players. The Nuggets were struggling against Toronto and Brooklyn, who feature some smaller guards like, Dennis Schroeder in Brooklyn, and Toronto's got a bevy of different players. So we're hitting a stretch of the schedule coming up here in a second, where tonight you've got the Golden State Warriors, who obviously it's Steph Curry, right? And with Steph Curry, the the Warriors are one of the best teams in the league as a smaller guard team. And then you've got Podmitsky and Hield, who are a little bit bigger, but still perimeter threats. On Thursday, you've got the Cleveland Cavaliers. Okay, fast forward a little bit. Saturday, you're in Washington. Sunday, Atlanta, Trae Young. Next Thursday, and there'll be some NBA Cup games in between. We don't know those games yet. But next Thursday, Portland, Scoot Henderson, Shadon Sharp, some guys out on the perimeter that are speedy. And then you've got the Phoenix Suns on Christmas and 2 days before, we'll call that Festivus, where you're going to have Bradley Beal and Tyus Jones attacking you at the same time Devin Booker and Kevin Durant does. So the Nuggets defense is really going to get stressed here. So it's all the more better that Aaron Gordon came back on Sunday, because that will help them significantly. We mentioned this on the podcast around the times they were playing Dallas a couple times in a row there, where I really wanted to see the matchup with Aaron Gordon, because you'd have Christian Braun as your point of attack defender and Aaron Gordon as your backside defender, right? I think Christian's really good at a lot of different things on defense, including walling up and playing against some of these stronger wing ball carriers like, Devin Booker or Luka Doncic or whoever that might be. But you see the struggles when he has to guard a Kyrie Irving or a James Harden, who's running around on the perimeter, going through screens, utilizing a lot of bodies to get free and create advantages. And the Nuggets don't have a single guy who can navigate a screen. That's at least what we've seen through 18 games thus far this season. Who loves screens? The Golden State Warriors. So I do not like this matchup tonight. And, the Nuggets are favored by a couple points in this game, but I think we're going to see what's been on display so far this season versus the last two, which is the Nuggets lack an identity, lack solutions to some of their problems, don't have the depth to make up for it. And the things that made them so good on defense in the last couple of years are failing them right now. And a lot of that is due to Kentavious Caldwell-Pope leaving for Orlando. I know he's not off to the greatest statistical start, but I can tell you the Nuggets never lost a game with KCP on the floor against the Golden State Warriors, which was his primary job that he was brought here to do, right? He was brought into Denver to help them against smaller guards, an issue that basically plagued them the entire Nikola Jokic era. And Gary Harris did a pretty good job. But the theory is Nikola will not struggle as much on the inside due to his lack of athleticism, jumping. He's a really good athlete. I hate that word, but he's not the biggest jumper. And he can't make up some of those things at the rim. So if you slow down the guys coming at him from the perimeter with good perimeter defense, Jokic will have time to get position and be a good defender, which we've seen the last 2 years. Jokic has actually been a really good defender inside. But when guys are getting free runs at him from the perimeter and can jump over him, can jump around him, Jokic struggles. That's not Jokic's fault. You should not be allowing free runs to the rim and being, having to play your center up at the 3-point line. So you have to hedge and double every single pick and roll. The Nuggets need someone who can navigate screens. Whether Christian develops into that, they find someone, I don't know. I don't know the solution at this point, but that is a problem and probably one of the team's biggest red flags, that they can't guard the A1 play in the NBA right now, which is the pick and roll. Aaron Gordon does help this issue. I don't think we saw full Aaron Gordon in that LA Clippers game. He's just coming back. He's coming off the bench. The Nuggets can do some things where they hide Jokic out on the perimeter, put Aaron as that primary role defender and double and get a little dicey and dance around on the backside with rotations. So Aaron should help with this. He is the team's second best or third best defender, depending on the night. The problem is you're asking a lot of Aaron Gordon. And this has been the whole Aaron Gordon story in Denver, is you ask a ton of Aaron Gordon. Backup center, starting power forward, a guy who can space the floor, a guy who can play make, yada, yada, yada. You're adding one more thing to his plate, which we've already seen his calves go early on this season while he was playing such good ball. I just worry you're putting too much on Aaron Gordon. Likewise, Nikola Jokic is playing 40 minutes a night at this point, right? You're asking a lot of some big name players. And that's why they're paid, right? But at the same time, it's not a recipe for sustainable success to have really just 8 guys you're playing this early on in the NBA season. Dario Saric has to give you something. Zeke Naji has to give you something. In the world where Vlatko Čančar and Deron Holmes are not coming back, the Nuggets can't have those two, plus Saric and Naji, plus DJ, who's basically a part-time player. 5 players on their roster being unplayable. Or rather, not contributing, I should say. They're not unplayable. That's incorrect. And then you add in Hunter Tyson, who's a complete unknown. So you have 6 players of your 15 standard roster spots who are players you don't necessarily trust. And with Jalen Pickett in the G League, that's 7. What's 15 minus 7? 8. That's where the Nuggets are. 8. So you see why I focus on the bottom half of the roster sometimes is this is where the answers are to why the Nuggets may get so fatigued, yada, yada. But it will be interesting tonight to see if, Russ guards Curry at times, 36-year-old Russ, poor Russ, having to run around and guard Steph Curry. He'll have the energy to do it. This could be a huge opportunity for Christian Braun to prove that some of the things we've seen early on this season are wrong. Golden State's been better than a lot of people thought they were going to be at 12-7. Unfortunately for them, DeAnthony Melton got hurt. He was a key figure for them. This is the final in-season tournament game. The Nuggets will not be advancing, but this will determine who they match up with twice between the 8th and the 19th. They'll have a couple games, and we don't know those opponents yet. And then on the 5th, on Thursday, they play the Cleveland Cavaliers, who have been, to this point, if not the best team in the NBA, the second best team in the NBA behind the Boston Celtics. They're 18-3. They've lost 1 game at home. The Nuggets are going into Cleveland. You can pretty much tally that as a loss. They've got two smaller guards between Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, and Garland's playing like an all-star, and we know what Donovan Mitchell is. Mobley's finally figuring out a lot of the pieces and the flashes we've seen over time. And then you got Jared Allen. We'll talk about that game more on Thursday because we have a podcast between now and then. But I'm just saying, the red flag that keeps popping up about perimeter defense, which was an issue early on in the Nikola Jokic era, which was magically solved by Kentavious Caldwell-Pope with a little splash of Bruce Brown, it's a giant issue again. And it's popping up every single time the Nuggets run into a guy that's 6'4" or below and, can shoot the heck out of the ball. And unfortunately, the Nuggets haven't been able to take advantage of those smaller guards on defense yet because Aaron Gordon was out of the lineup, so they didn't have their bigger team. And I think that's one of the reasons why they got crushed by the Knicks. This is just such a bad matchup without Aaron Gordon. So Aaron is going to solve some of the issues that we're seeing with the Nuggets. I think they're a little bit better than a 10-8 team. Jokic has missed games, Jamal's missed games, Aaron's missed a month. But I don't think that they're, a contender right now. They're probably a step below, and they've got to figure some things out and maybe find another player to fill in. I will say positively, I really liked what Julian Strawther did in that game against LA. Coming back after the Knicks game and winning big in Utah was nice, especially because the Nuggets have struggled historically in Utah, no matter how bad the Jazz have been. So that's kind of where the Nuggets are right now. It's just mediocre. We're in the doldrums of the NBA season. Before Christmas, most people aren't even paying attention yet. Jokic has been fantastic, but the team around him is struggling. And I'll put it this way. Norm Powell, I believe, has more points against the Nuggets this year as his game high against the Nuggets than Porter or Jamal have scored against anybody. I think that's a real stat. That's bad news. And, when you're in a game against the Clippers where both Jamal and Porter score 18 on positive efficiency shooting and Jokic gets a triple-double and everything's pretty much fine from your offensive statistics standpoints, Julian chips in with a bunch of points, but you lose the game because you can't contain James Harden and Norm Powell, plus the combination of your recipe for winning in victory is so thin because of that containment issue that you need to hit all of your free throws. Well, 9 missed free throws ends up costing you a game against the Clippers team who probably going to make the playoffs, but let's be honest, isn't going anywhere. So a little disappointing. Side note, let's switch gears. Paul Millsap called it a career today. Still to this day, the biggest free agent signing in Nuggets history. 3-year, $90 million deal. Back in 2017, before the Nuggets had really done anything with Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray. And in combination with Michael Malone, Paul Millsap, I think, was responsible, maybe the second most responsible person behind Michael Malone, for instilling that championship culture that blossomed in Denver. The toughness, the physicality, the IQ that the Nuggets play with. Paul was such a huge part of that. And, I know Paul, the player, in terms of production, maybe didn't live up to some of the hype because he was an all-star 3 different times in his career, was not that player in Denver. But he was so important to the Nuggets turning into the champion that they turned into a year after Paul left. And I think he deserves a lot of credit. And I don't think he gets enough of it from people outside of like the real sicko Nuggets people, right? But the moment that will always stick to me with Paul is down 3-1 against the Clippers. He goes toe-to-toe with one of the Morris twins, and the game was over. It was a 15-point lead for the Clippers late in the third quarter. The Nuggets weren't going to come back from down 3-1 twice. You might as well fold it in. And Paul gets into a fight with one of the Morris twins, and then he himself gets hot. And then the Nuggets get hot, and then they win that game. And you know the rest of the story. They pulled the 3-1 comeback for a second time in 2 series. And without Paul, that doesn't happen. And without Paul, the Nuggets probably, don't rise the way that they did. Get through those Spurs series, the Portland up and downs. Paul was a big part of all that. And unfortunately, his career ended with the Nuggets in a time where Jamal was hurt and, they didn't live out to that full potential, because if Jamal doesn't get hurt with Aaron Gordon's addition, the way the Nuggets looked those 10 games we always talk about, there's a real chance Paul Millsap gets a ring. And he never got one. And he chased one with the Nets and the Sixers after he was with the Nuggets, but didn't get it. He was a great player with the Hawks, a great player with the Jazz, and he had a great impact with the Denver Nuggets. And he hung up his sneakers on Tuesday, and he deserves the shout out because he was a very important Denver Nugget. And the stats won't show it, but the real heads know. All right, Mile High Hoops Podcast. I'm Jake Shapiro. Make sure you like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Denver Sports. I will be back on Thursday where we will talk about this Golden State game and do a more in-depth preview of the matchup against the Cleveland Cavaliers. I will talk to you then.